Good morning. Good to see everyone this morning. We are in the life of Christ. It's a year-long study, literally. And last week we had, for the first time, Chris has teamed up with us. Derek's in another room teaching with James Leggett, I think, on the book of Romans. So when Chris got up here for the first time, he scared me to death because he said he was glad he was where he was in the order, because if he messed up, I could straighten anything he messed up out. Well, number one, that may not be true. I may not know how to do any better than he did in the first place. Second place, what'll happen to any of us, we got a lot of material to cover. And so he didn't quite get to finish fasting. He gave us a 2-minute thumbnail sketch of fasting. So naturally, and I'm thankful for this, a member of the class came to me afterward and said, could you do a little more on fasting? So we're going to start there this morning. So we'll read first from Mark chapter 2, verse 18. I'm mainly going to focus on Matthew chapter 9 in this early going, but I do want to see this, Mark chapter 2, verse 18, the disciples of John and of the Pharisees were fasting. Then they came and said to him, why did the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? All right, Matthew's account, Matthew chapter 9, verse 14, says this, then the disciples of John came to him saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Now, the first thing I'd observe is, I think you can see that there's no contradiction here. Matthew just says that the disciples of John asked this question. Mark gives us a little bit more. He says they came with the Pharisees as well to ask this question. But nonetheless, that's consistent. It doesn't really matter that we've got two different folks. And let me promise you, if each one of us in this audience today said, let me tell you who was in class today, I'm going to guarantee you're going to tell different people. You're going to name different names. That doesn't mean that you're saying so-and-so wasn't here. It just means those are the ones you remember or whatever. And the inspired writers do much the same thing. J.W. McGarvey commented on this. He said, as John the Baptist observed one almost continual fast, his diet being locusts and wild honey, his disciples naturally had great respect for that rite and noted the lack of its observance by Jesus as an apparent defect in his character. They were honest inquirers, and Jesus answered them respectfully as such. I don't know whether the Pharisees were honest or not, but I know that I agree with McGarvey. I think the disciples of John were. They just wanted to know. And it's a fair question to ask. Wayne Jackson, in his New Testament commentary, said, the Pharisees fasted twice each week, and he gives reference, Luke 18:12. And generally, and here comes my typist problem, it's not dis, it's did so with much pomp. Matthew 6:16 warns about that kind of thing. Those close to the Lord were noticeably different. In other words, they didn't fast. Okay, look at verse 15 then in Matthew chapter 9. And Jesus said to them, can the friends of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. When Jackson looked at that, he said marriage was a celebrated occasion among the Hebrews. Friends of the bridegroom stayed around for about a week following the ceremony. Therefore, rejoicing was expected as long as the bridegroom was with them. The Lord then cryptically noted that the time was coming when the bridegroom will be taken away. And here comes my typist again. Should be from, not, I don't know what from is. If you get a definition, let me know. I messed up there. But from, taken away from them. The passive voice is significant. Now, wait a minute. Why is it significant? Well, if it's passive, it means Jesus is not going to leave per se on his own. Instead, he's going to be forced to. Somebody else is going to take him away and leave them. Now, you can look at that two ways. One, he'll be taken away because they will crucify him. The Jewish leaders will reject him. That's one way. The second way is that it's the will of the Father that he die so that you and I can live. And he's still passive. He submits, he yields to his Father on that. So then he goes on. Clearly, this is a reference to his eventual death. Mourning, as reflected in fasting, then would be appropriate. Now it was not. Okay, what does that mean for us today? Well, what it means is something I didn't understand when I was younger. When I was younger, I thought fasting was New Testament. They fasted in the New Testament. They didn't fast in the New Testament. I'm talking about the disciples of Jesus didn't fast. He was with them. So today we are to fast. And I want to talk about that a little bit as we go along. But first I want to finish what the Lord brought up to go along with this. Verses 16 and 17, Matthew 9. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch pulls away from the garment, and the tear is made worse. Nor do they put new wine into old wineskins, or else the wineskins break, the wine is spilled, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. Okay. The illustrations of the cloth and the wineskins we find in Jackson are thought to convey the general truth that the combination of the old and new dispensations would not merely be unsuitable but injurious, tending to defeat rather than promote the aims of the Messianic dispensation. And Jackson was quoting from Broadus when he said that. He goes on to say, let's look at Luke 7, because Luke's got a parallel going on here. Luke 5. Luke chapter 5, verse 39. Let's see what he has to say there. Luke 5, 39. All right. So here's and no one, having drunk old wine, immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. Jackson goes on to observe, the Savior appears to acknowledge that there would be emotional ties to the old regime. Many would view it as better and resist leaving it. But the Mosaic economy eventually must give way to that which is genuinely better. And by the way, isn't that what the book of Hebrews is all about? Is demonstrating that the law of Moses is not better than the law of Christ, that Jesus is better and his covenant is superior, it's better, and that's what they needed to learn. But you can understand, do you have a hard time changing things? You know, one of the worst things my wife can do is decide we got to rearrange the furniture. You know, it takes me weeks to get used to the new arrangement. And it doesn't look right. And furthermore, I go through there in the dark. It doesn't work out very, very well either. You know, if you understand what I'm saying. We like it the way we like it, you know, so to speak. When you go to somebody's house, you ever observe, I don't sit down, even when they offer me a seat, I don't sit down until I figure out where their seat is. Because you want to make somebody uncomfortable sit in their seat, in their house. And they're going to be uncomfortable real quickly. Well, think about how long they'd had the law of Moses. It literally was, over 1,000 years that they'd been living by this law. And so they would be uncomfortable with the change. Thus, the old wine appears to be better, but it's not really. And the Lord is helping us to see that. Okay, what else do we need to know about fasting? Well, I gave you some quick notes. I'm not going to read all these verses, but I am going to quickly go over what I would propose that we need to think about it. First of all, Fasting, now watch this, should be practiced. Christians today should fast. Number one, it should be for private devotion. That comes from Matthew 6:16 to 18. Number two, when one has seen his sin and is repenting of it. I think in that case, oh boy, that's not Daniel. Not David. That may be Saul. I'll have to go back and double check that. And then number three, to devote oneself to prayer. And that's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 7:5. Furthermore, fasting may be practiced in times of sorrow. And I will suggest to you that many, many times when I go talk to people who have just lost a loved one, they won't eat anything. They may not eat anything for several days. They may devote themselves mostly to prayer and to weeping, of course. And then fasting allows one to concentrate on the spiritual. So you see Paul fast when he was still called Saul, Acts chapter 9. You see the fast that's going on in Acts 10, that's Peter and then the household of Cornelius. Acts 13 is sending the apostles out, really sending out Paul and Barnabas to do their mission work. And then there's a fast in Acts chapter 14, verse 23. That's as they come off of that first missionary journey. Now, here's a couple of things I think we ought to observe that I didn't write down. Number one, I don't believe the elders can demand, I don't believe there's scriptural authority for them to demand a fast. That as a thing that's, okay, everybody's commanding, no. But they could request. They could say, we're dealing with a very important issue right now, and they may tell us what that is. We're contemplating how we ought to do, and you think of whatever that it might be. Very important spiritual matter involving souls. We want to ask you to consider sometime during the coming week to give up a meal, and in place of eating your meal, pray. That would be an appropriate use of the fast. Notice it's left to the individual, but it's still a request made by the elders, and they can make that request. Just like when they introduce the budget, they'll request that you increase your contribution by a certain percentage. Well, those of us who are able hopefully do that because we want to. It's a free will offering, but they can't demand it. Is if you see the difference I'm trying to make there. Okay, any questions on fasting? I'm going to try not to spend the rest of the day on it, but any questions on it? Or thoughts, comments? Chris actually did a great job with the two first parts. It's hard to complete these lessons. It just is. Anybody? Okay. Read these verses. If you have more questions, feel free to ask. I'll do the best I can to answer them. Okay. Let's look at Mark chapter 5 now. We're going to look at the case of Jairus, and as we look at that, we're going to start off in Mark. We will go to other references as well. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. Here's what it says. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude was gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet. Now, Jairus had a really strong position in the Jewish religion. The ruler of the synagogue was a man who had a certain amount of authority. He would select who was going to do the scripture reading for the day, and therefore who was going to do some of the teaching. And yet here he is literally bowing down, falling down at Jesus' feet. Why would he do that? Well, he's really dealing with a difficult situation. I think McGarvey noted that his pain and his suffering, concern for his family, overcame his pride. And I think that's probably a good way to put it. You know, Pride goes by the wayside when you got a need as important as this need was. So Luke now. Let's go to Luke chapter 8 and pick up what he says. And you want to hold your thumb or finger in that same Mark reference, because we're going to keep coming back and forth to these two as we go along. So we got Luke chapter 8, and we particularly want to look at verse 42. And listen to what Luke has to say as he talks about this. For he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. Okay? So that's what Luke says. Mark says, as we already read, she was at the point of death. Matthew has the ruler say she is dead. So go to Matthew chapter 9, where we were a little bit earlier, and notice what is said there by Matthew as he talks about it. He says she is dead. So worshipped him, saying, my daughter has just died. Okay, now you got to say, wait a minute, how do you harmonize those? Those seem a little bit different, don't they? So it appears, and I think Wayne Jackson's the one that I used, it appears that when the ruler left home, the girl was dying. She's not dead yet. She's at the point of death when he leaves. So when he gets to Jesus, Matthew has him saying, she is dead. That may have been an assumption on his part. He may not have known, but because of her serious condition, he may have just said, well, she's dead. And listen, having worked in the church office this many years, this happened in this office a little while back. Somebody contacted us and said, a certain individual that many people here love has died. We put it out as an announcement on the Realm app. So-and-so died. We immediately got a phone call. No, he's not dead yet. Ooh. So we immediately put out a retraction on Realm. And then when we got a semi-official word that he was dead, we refused to do anything until we were absolutely sure that he's dead. See, because we don't want to go through that again, so to speak. So I think you can see how those can harmonize. There's not any serious difficulty there. So he's come to Jesus. Notice verse 19, Matthew chapter 9. So Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. So you got quite a crowd now. As Jesus goes along, they're following him. Wherever he goes, they're going. They don't know why he's going. At least some of them don't. But they're following him anyway. Big crowd is going along with him. So look at verses 20 and 21. And suddenly a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched the hem of his garment. For she said to herself, if only I may touch his garment, I shall be made well. Would you please notice something? She believed in Jesus and his power before anything happened. That's very important to notice. Did she act upon it? She acted upon it. Belief on her part is not merely thinking, if Jesus would just help me out, I could be made whole. That's not all she did. She went to touch him, touch his garment, because she believed she'd be healed. So watch. Faith, yes. Was it active? Yes. They go together, don't they, when you think about it. So now look again at that Luke chapter 8, because in Luke 8, verse 44, we've got Luke again talking. Here's what he says. Came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. Okay, so there's instantaneous healing. She's healed by touching the garment. Now watch the Lord's response right there in Luke. We'll continue with verse 45. And Jesus said, who touched me? Then all denied it. Peter and those with him said, Master, The multitudes throng and press you, and you say, "Who touches me?" Well, think about that just a minute now. You got this big crowd that's following Jesus. Don't you imagine he may have gotten bumped, a time or two, maybe? Peter is just, he's astounded. What do you mean, who touched you? It might be better to say, who close to you didn't touch you? That might be what he's thinking. But here's the deal, and this is most important because Jesus, watch this, verse 46, somebody touched me, for I perceived power going from me. Isn't that a remarkable statement within itself? She was healed because of the touching of the garment, but he felt the power go into her and work with her. I'd like to know more about that, but that's all the Scripture gives us on it. So I can't say any more than what's written there, but it's really quite interesting. Now, on the basis of that power going out of him and him making that comment, she steps forward and talks to Jesus. So here we go. Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. She declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him and how she was healed immediately. And he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace." It's really a powerful and a beautiful expression that is laid out there. But as I've already observed, it was not faith alone. It was an active faith demonstrated by her coming and touching Jesus. And if you really study the New Testament, you're going to discover that faith that is good is always active. Faith that will save you is always active. Look at James chapter 2. Pretty extensive discussion there. And faith without works is dead. You want proof of that? Take a look at the devils. Because the devils have faith. In fact, they got a lot of faith. They believe Jesus is. They'll confess him. We see that in some of our studies already. And they know he's Lord. He's Son of God. They know that. But does that save them? Well, that answer is pretty easy. No, it does not save them. And I made that comment not too many days ago to a denominational fellow, and he had no response. Just made the observation, said no more. He had no response. What are you going to say to that? It is evident the faith's got to be active. Okay. Well, you by now you're thinking, oh, Jesus has forgotten about Jairus' daughter. I don't think he's forgotten a thing. But the text picks it up again. We'll look at verses 49 and 50. While he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher." But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, "Do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well." Now let's be very, very careful. The word there in the original language literally is keep on believing. I want you to remember what Jairus did. He came to Jesus, and in Matthew's account, she's dead. If you'll come, she can be alive. That's pretty strong faith, don't you think? So somebody from the house comes, and you know what happens to our faith when it's challenged? What happens when somebody questions it? Do we sometimes have a little bit of doubt then? Is that possible? I would say that the answer to that is yes. We may have some doubt. So Jesus said, just keep on believing. It's going to be all right. We're going to deal with it. We're going to handle it. I think that's a beautiful idea that's set forth here. Verse 51, still in Luke. When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the girl. Now, if you read all these different accounts of this incident, Jesus chased everybody else out of the house. They were already there. They were already getting ready to have a funeral. Now, Jews thing. Study the Jews even today, and the conservative, the so-called Orthodox Jews will bury. In fact, they try to bury before the sun sets. Immediately. And so people are already gathering. They're already getting ready. The wailers are there, and I mean they're crying, going on. They're there, for this thing. Jesus chased them all out. Takes Peter. As we go on in the life of Jesus, that becomes kind of what we sometimes call the inner circle. He's got 12 disciples who will eventually be called apostles. But of those 12, 3 play this kind of a role over and over again. They're taking special places. When we go to the Mount of Transfiguration, we get to Matthew 17. Guess who goes? Peter, James, John. That's who goes. So we're going to see that over and over again as we look at the life of Christ. All right. I'm going to briefly go to Matthew 9, 23 to 25, and it's going to tell you what I just basically said. When Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the noisy crowd wailing, he said to them, "Make room, for the girl is not dead but sleeping." How'd they respond to that? They ridiculed him. But when the crowd was put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. Now, Luke gives us a little bit more to think about there in verses 53 to 56. Chapter 8 is where we were. And so we got and they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. Hey, I like that. Maybe you ought to underline that. They knew she was dead. Okay? Is that important? Uh-huh. Why? Because modern day so-called faith healers, they like to heal somebody that you can't tell they're really sick. Oh, my head hurt. Can you tell if my head's hurting? I mean, you got to trust me, don't you? If I say my head hurts, you don't know whether it does or it doesn't. So somebody can supposedly heal me, and who knows? Whether they did or they didn't. I'm going to tell you, I got a pretty good idea. They didn't. Okay? But in this case, they knew she was dead. There was no question in their mind. That had already been ascertained. And so very, very important to know that. But he put them outside, took her by the hand, and called, saying, "Little girl, arise." Now, in the reading that I've done, I discovered that is the used by parents awakening a sleeping child. Okay, little girl, it's time to get up now. Isn't that a beautiful thought? That the Lord, he didn't have any children of his own, but he treats this little girl as his own child, you might say. And he says, "Little girl, get up now. It's time to get up." So, and she does. She gets up. Just exactly like he said for her to do. And that's a beautiful, beautiful idea that goes on there. And then it says, then her spirit returned, and she arose immediately, and he commanded that she be given something to eat. And her parents were astonished, but he charged them to tell no one what happened. I don't know how many times he does that, and I'm not sure anybody ever honors that. Don't tell a soul. Well, good news like that, we're going to tell it. It's going to be hard to hold it back, and they don't. They are urged to get her something to eat, which, by the way, verifies she's alive if she starts eating. And so, knew she was dead, but she was raised from the dead. Very, very important that the Lord's able to do that. All right. One more lesson we need to look at. We're going to go now to, really two. We're going to first look at the blind men. Go back to Matthew. We're in Matthew now, chapter 9 again, verse 27. When Jesus departed from there, we assume then from the house where the little girl was, two blind men followed him, crying out and saying, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, make this note, and you want to research this. In the Hebrew way of thinking, Son of David is the Messiah. That's who they're calling him. They're calling him the Messiah. And they want him to have mercy on them. Very, very important. So pick up at verse 28. And when he had come in, let me make sure I'm at the right spot. Okay. When he had come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be to you." And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, saying, "See that no one knows it." But when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. Now, they were believers already. How do I know? They called him the Messiah, Son of David. They already believe in him. Let's be careful. Modern day faith healers, if you don't get well when they pray over you or whatever they do, they say, "Well, you just don't have enough faith." Excuse me? You don't find that situation in the New Testament. First of all, those that came to him had the faith, but there are people without any demonstration of faith who are healed. Take the lame man at the temple gate, beautiful, Acts chapter 3. Did he have faith? Well, who knows? He had faith enough to ask for money. He's got that kind of faith, but does he have faith in the ability? I don't think he even thought about Peter and John healing him. I don't believe that's an issue. What about the man who was let down through the roof? You remember they tore the hole in the roof, they let him down. Did he have faith? No, Jesus commends the faith of the four men that carried him and lowered him down. But he doesn't commend the faith of that man. He just heals him, right? I don't believe that your faith or lack thereof had any bearing per se on Jesus' ability to work a miracle. I don't believe that had anything to do with it. Now, miracles did occur because people had enough faith to ask. Or they had enough faith to act, like the woman that touched the hem of his garment. But I think that's very, very important for us to see. Okay. Then pick up verse 32 through 34. As they went out, behold, they brought to him a man mute and demon-possessed. And when the demon was cast out, the mute spoke, and the multitudes marveled, saying, "It was never seen like this in Israel." Every time that kind of thing happens, how do the Pharisees respond? Listen to the next verse. But the Pharisees said, "He casts out demons by the ruler of the demons." That's going to come up again. He's going to deal with it in chapter 12 when he talks about the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. But very, very interesting that he does have the power to cast out. And furthermore, you may want to observe that power to cast them out does not come from the devil. It comes from God, of course. I don't know. Mr. Bob's asking a question. Why do I think that Jesus told them not to publicize it? I don't know the answer. I can give you some ideas. How about that? But I don't have the answer. And you're welcome. Anything that's... Here's my thinking about it, okay? He didn't need any bigger crowds than he already had. And you start publicizing this kind of thing, there are going to be more people come. So that's a possibility. Is that why? I don't know. I don't. There is another possibility, but I don't think this is God-like. And so I'm not inclined to go this way. But, sometimes people use reverse psychology on their children. And they'll say, "Now, don't you clean up your room. Because we might go get an ice cream cone after you clean up your room. Don't you clean up your room." Well, see, but I don't think the Lord works that way. So I don't, that's why I don't go there. I think the other is possible, but is it the one? Is it the answer? I don't know. I don't have an answer. Yes, sir. He does do that, and that's a good point. Ron has observed on more than one occasion, Jesus says, my time has not yet come. And if this thing gets too big, too fast, the Jews may be moved to act more quickly and put him to death. So there's another plausible possibility that's involved. And maybe the two go together in a certain sense of the word. I don't know. Okay, we want to go back to Luke, and this time we're going to be in chapter 4. And you may be thinking, wait a minute, why are we bouncing around? It does not appear that Luke wrote the life of Christ in chronological order. He organized it according to a plan that he had in his mind that made sense. But it doesn't appear that he goes from just one incident to the next and just follows down the life of Christ. Doesn't appear he does that. So that's why we end up bouncing around, especially in Luke. Luke chapter 4, beginning at verse 16. So he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. Custom, you want to put in the margin, put in an idea what that is? Consistent habit. His custom, you want to see another case of it? Look at Daniel chapter 6. His custom from his youth was to pray 3 times a day, morning, noon, night. That was Daniel. This time we're looking at Jesus, and his custom that is his consistent habit, is to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. You're not going to find Jesus violating or failing to honor. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. Okay, remember what I told you? The ruler of the synagogue is the one that chooses who's going to read. And here's Jesus back home, and they honor him by giving him the scroll of Isaiah. Now, their Bibles were on scrolls, and really usually it's a scroll per book. They didn't put all of them together. So we got this scroll. Now you got to see Jesus. You got to imagine he's rolling this thing back and forth to go where he wants to go. Is he familiar with the text? Well, the answer to that's obvious. Yes, he's familiar with the text. So here he goes. When he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. That is a specific reference, you can hear it, to the Jubilee. What happened in the Jubilee? In Leviticus 25, verse 10, it says slaves are freed in the Jubilee. Jesus is coming to free the slaves. Slaves to what? Slaves to sin. That's what he's coming to do. And now he's read from Isaiah, and he's reading in particular Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 and 2, and he is announcing what he's here for. Now, you can just about imagine. What happens is when they're going to read the Bible, everybody stands up. That's a pretty good sign of respect, whether we practice that custom or not. That's what they did. Everybody stood up and he read. Well, then when he finishes reading, everybody sits down and they wait for him to talk. That's what's going to happen next. They wait for him to have a comment in reference to it. All right, Luke chapter 4, verse 21, listen. Or well, let's look at 20. Then he closed the book, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. And the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Do you think they knew what this thing was about? This is the Messiah. This is the Messiah's kingdom that he's talking about. And he said, today it's fulfilled. And all of them are going to respond to that. How are they going to respond? Look at Mark, if you would. Mark chapter 6. because Mark tells us something that I think is very, very important to our understanding. Mark chapter 6, verses 2 and 3. And when the Sabbath had come, he began teaching in the synagogue. Many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters with us?" So they were offended at him. Now, I love the comment that McGarvey made. They brought forth every item of trade and relationship by which they could confirm themselves in their conviction that he was just a human being as they were. That's pretty good. You know, you just a man. We grew up with you, man. We grew up with you. I guess that in a much, much lesser sense, that could happen to somebody that played football with a certain fella, and he ends up going pro. And well, I know you. I know I knocked you down one day in pro. Well, you may have, but you might not today. Because he's playing pro ball. Well, Jesus, they knew him, and they're trying to convince themselves he is just a one of them. That's all he is. Now, the word offended there expresses ongoing distrust, a disgust. It's not quite what I would have thought of when I thought of offended, but that is the meaning of that word. In fact, in Matthew 13, verse 57, that same word is used, and there it's ongoing distrust and attitude to disgust, same thing. So go back to Luke, and we're going to finish up in Luke. So I'm going to quit flipping you back and forth here. Luke, we're going to look at chapter 4 again, verse 23. And here's what Luke reports. He said to them, "You will surely say this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself. Whatever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in your country.'" McGarvey says the expression was evidently used contemptuously, as if they said, "You can do big things at Capernaum, but you cannot do them here. You cannot deceive us. We know you." Well, that sounds like exactly what's going on. Watch verse 24 as he continues. Then he said, "Assuredly I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. Jealousy forbids his countrymen to honor him." That's what McGarvey said. And I think that's probably true. That's probably a good way to view it. Verse 25 to 27 now, as we continue here. "But I tell you truly, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a great famine throughout all the land. But to none of them was Elijah sent, except to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, except Naaman the Syrian." Now, look closely at this. First of all, I gave you the two references. The first reference is from 1 Kings 27, 8 through 16. The second is 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 14. Do you notice that Jesus brings up two outsiders? Widow of Zarephath. That's near Sidon. That's not in typical Israelite country. And yet, here is the prophet sent to stay with her. Number two, lots of lepers in Israel. Who did he heal? Naaman. Where was Naaman from? Syria. In fact, he was a general in the Syrian army that led the battle against Israel and took some of them captive. So Jesus is making a pretty good point. And that is, you folks basically don't want me to be who I am. All right, so now, closing verses 28 to 30. So all those in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath and rose up and thrust him out of the city. And they led him to the brow of the hill on which their city was built, that they might throw him down over the cliff. Then passing through the midst of them, he went his way. A miracle, I think. I don't really have any doubt about it. Jackson says they angrily rose up and drove him from the synagogue and even the city. The services were completely disrupted. Look, they're supposed to be worshiping God. It's the Sabbath day. And they get so distracted because he's not what they thought he ought to be that they forget about worshiping God and they go to hurl his son off the hill. That's really what they do. They forced him to a hill with an overhanging cliff with the intention of throwing him over. Now listen to this comment of Jackson. I've thought about writing this down somewhere and keeping it to where I can look at it every now and then. Here's what he said. But where men propose, God can dispose. And I like that. Men may, propose to do something God doesn't want them to do. God can take care of it. He can handle it. Okay. So I went 1 minute over time, but we finished 3 sections instead of 2. So next week Ron's on, and I know he's already ready. I've got his outline in my position. All right. Thank you.